we show people what their business is worth, some of them are very disappointed. And so one of the exercises that we will take them through is we'll say, let's look at this deal as though you were buying the business. And let's imagine you're 25 years younger. And let's imagine you have this amount of money, which is approximately what your buyer is going to have. Now, let's look at the price. Let's look at how much you'd have to borrow. Let's look at how much you need to take as a salary. And we'll walk through the deal and show them, yeah, this is what can be, what is affordable.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Humans of Flippa. So today I have with me Dave Barnett, who is he's many things, but on the online space, but he is also the author of several books in the M&A space. I was about to say online M&A space. A few of those books include Buying versus Starting a Small Business. That was actually the first book that I read of his. And I did this initially just to kind of learn a little bit more about Dave, but then I found myself buying his next book and his next book, and I just ended up buying three books.
I saw that spike in the sales results, Nick. Thank you very much.
Sure. Hopefully this leads to a little bit more. But some of these other titles include 21 Stupid Things People Do When Trying to Buy a Business and Smarter Than a Startup. So as the names imply, these are all books related to buying businesses as an alternative to building, potentially. He's also the owner and the host of the podcast YouTube channel and blog, Small Business and Deal Making. And he's been doing this for many years. I think we just talked about, I mentioned, over a decade. And if you go through his content, you'll see that he offers really this no BS perspective on this space, backed by extremely valuable tips and insights, not only from his own entrepreneurial endeavors, but also as somebody who helps others in acquiring their own businesses. So without further ado, Dave, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you on.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to this talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know I gave a quick intro, but can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be 50 this year. 2025 is a big year for me.
Congratulations.
And so, thank you. Grew up watching TV in the 80s, and there was this TV show called Family Ties with this character, Alex P. Keaton, and he was like all about money and business. And I just thought that was like the role model I wanted to emulate as a young teenager. So I just thought that was great. And everywhere I would go, I would look at the business I was in, and I would be thinking of ways that they could be doing it better. Like, oh, it would be faster if they did this. It would be better if they did this. I bet people would pay more if they had this. And so I've just always been interested in business. And when I, was growing up, I had all those childhood businesses that people do, lawn mowing and where I live, there's snow. So shoveling snow and all that kind of stuff. And, got into sales and got my first jobs. And I always knew I wanted to be in business. And so when I finished high school, I went to university to get a business degree, thinking that they would teach me how to be a businessman. And they don't really do that in business school. They teach you how to get a job at a big company. And my real education came after that when I got my first corporate job, because I left university and I started a business and with a buddy, and we did that for almost a year. And then he followed a girl to Toronto and left me alone. So I had folded it up and I got a job, but I got a job with the Yellow Pages. And in the mid to late 90s, the Yellow Pages was the Google of its day. Like, if you came home and there was a leaking pipe in your house, you reached for the Yellow Pages. That was the way you were going to find a plumber in your town that could come help you. And so I got to go around and meet the owners and managers of all these local businesses, and I got to learn about their business and how they made money, what kind of customers they wanted. And eventually, Google did come along and smartphones, and I realized the Yellow Page days were numbered. And so I left and I started a business with another partner. Eventually got into, that was a consumer home service business. I left that because I wanted to get back to serving entrepreneurs. I really liked meeting with business owners. And so I got into finance brokerage, and I was brokering commercial debt for small businesses, and did that until the big crisis in 08, 09. And then my pipeline basically dried up. So I pivoted into business brokerage, and I knew that I didn't know how to be a business broker. So I joined a big international franchise name, and I was able to then access IBBA training. So I went through their program and learned how to be a business broker, and had a 3 year career selling, 3.5 year career selling businesses for other people. And that was a lot of fun. It was really exciting. It was also a terrible business to be in, because it's all contingency driven. So you list a business for sale, and I know that people are used to seeing and hearing stories of businesses going up for sale and being sold very quickly. But the reality is that a lot of businesses can spend a year or more on the
It's a
market.
slow moving ship. Yeah.
Yeah, and being a business broker, you could talk to a business owner for 2 years before they decide to list. And then you list it for sale, you find a buyer, you can bring that right to the 11th hour, and then the deal can fall apart. And it can be something completely, literally outside of your control. Like, I've had deals fall apart when I was a broker because it was maybe a franchise business, and the franchisor was a jerk to the buyer on discovery day, and the deal fell apart. I've
Oh
had
man.
deals where banks have issued finance letters and then later changed their mind. And not because of anything the local bank person had to say, but like head office all of a sudden decided they were overexposed to a certain sector and didn't want to do any loans in that area. Um, Regulated industries where the buyer has to qualify for some kind of license from a government agency, not being approved, right? Like, all kinds of things can happen to cause these deals to fall apart. And when you got two young kids and you're trying to create a household budget and you got this roller coaster of cash flow. you
Yep.
know I was a broker during the great financial crisis, the great recession, I guess they're calling it. And there was a stretch of almost a year where we did a whole bunch of deals with no banks at all, because no banks were willing to basically make any loans. They had liquidity issues, and they were kind of panicky or whatever. So we did a whole bunch of deals just with buyers putting down payments and sellers carrying notes. And eventually, I think things got better. But for me, it was just such a stressful up and down time. It was also really exciting, trying to basically figure out these puzzles. Like, how can I, help the seller get what they're looking for and help the buyer do a deal that makes sense for them, and fit it together in such a way that the bank is going to approve and everyone's lawyer is going to, sign off on it. So it was really exciting in that respect, but it wasn't the kind of business where you sort of create a system and you've got regular clients and regular customers and regular sales. And so I left it in order to become a banker, believe it or not. And I worked for the bank for a couple of years. And while I was in banking, my phone just kept ringing, and it was people looking for help to do these deals, these small business acquisition deals. And I would tell people, like, I have a full-time job. I could help you out, but it would have to be, kind of side hustle kind of thing, like evenings and weekends. And I'm not a broker, so I'm just going to have to charge you like a consultant. And I started to do this on the side and started to build up this little side hustle business. Eventually, the bank reorganized and they offered me a package to eliminate my position. And so I took advantage of that time. It was a continuance. So they basically kept me on salary for 4 months. I was supposed to be looking for a job, but instead I was building this business that I have today. And that's when I wrote the first few of my books, and I put up a couple of websites, and I started my YouTube channel. And chiefly, I was working with people here in the region. LinkedIn was a big prospecting tool for me when I first got started, just letting people know the kind of work I was doing, being a consultant to people that are buying or selling. And then over time, the YouTube channel got bigger and bigger. I started to meet people from other places that wanted my help, started to work with more and more of these remote clients. Um, I don't know, like 2015 or 16, I think I put together some of my first online classes, which were adaptations of these day long seminars that I had put together when I was a business broker. So I was basically just taking this content that I knew people would sit through for a whole day, and I was bringing it into the online space and delivering it electronically. And then over time, added to the books, added some more, different courses. I've added bonus modules to all the programs now as they've grown over time. And, the following online continues to grow. And, I'm driven by one big mission. And my big mission is to help people avoid dumb deals. Um, you know, when I first got onto YouTube, I was making videos every week, and I would get these messages from people, and they would say things like, "Oh my God, I wish I had, seen this video 2 years ago." And the video didn't exist 2 years before that point. but they would say, I wish I had seen this video 2 years ago because it would have prevented me from doing this XYZ deal in which I lost $300,000, which was all the money our family had saved up when we
Oh,
moved here from our previous home, previous country, right? And more and more, I started to get these messages from people who were like, oh my God, because of this video, I realized there was this critical error in this deal I was working on. Thank you so much. And that just kind of fueled me to keep going, right? Um, you know, I, I, I'm a big believer that, uh, businesses are supposed to be assets. They're supposed to be tools that provide for us and our families. And the way that we do that is through solving other people's wants, needs, and problems. So there is something inherently good and virtuous about business because we're talking about a 100% voluntary interaction between two people where one person is solving another person's want, need, or problem at a price that they find is good enough to be willing to exchange their money to get the solution. And so, business is one of the reasons we all have, a great standard of living. We enjoy all the gizmos and things that we love today. Um, but, business is risky. And it's especially risky for people that are just getting into it for the first time. And, you mentioned in the beginning that I kind of have like a no BS attitude towards this. I've seen so much, pain and suffering by people getting into bad deals. I don't want that for anyone. And one of the problems with, buying and selling businesses is that there is no mechanism in a small business that lets you know how much your business is worth. So, your business is working, you're helping your customers, money's coming in, money's going out, et cetera. And if you were a publicly traded company like Coca-Cola, investors are pricing your company by buying and selling stock shares on the stock market, right? So the people at Coca-Cola know how much their business is worth all the time because the stock market is telling them. But in a small business, there's no mechanism for that. And so what ends up happening is when a person wants to sell their business, they then talk to someone, to try to set a price. They do some research, they get help. Sometimes they get qualified help. Sometimes they get helpers that aren't so qualified. They put a price on the business. And for all the period of time that they ran it, they were probably ignorant of what it was worth. And then all of a sudden they have to try to figure out what it's worth. And so you can have people that will invest lots of time and money into building a business, and it could very well be worth far less than they ever invested, right? Because they never really build something that delivers the cash flow and profitability that would warrant the investment they've made. But they want to get their money back out, so they go out there and they ask a price that's much higher than what it's really worth. They trying to recoup some of the losses. Like if you bought shares of Coca-Cola for $100 and it went down to 50 the next day, you would know that you lost money. A lot of small business people will put more and more investment into a business and not realize that they're losing money. They get to the end when they want to do a deal, and then they try to recoup those investments or losses by asking a really high price. And if the person on the other side of the table doesn't understand what they're doing, they could agree to the deal, right? And like some people will say, well, that's just the way the market works, or that's just how it is, caveat emptor, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that, but I don't want to see it happening on my watch with, especially with my clients. And so a big part of the work that we do here is we look at business deals with our clients to help analyze what we think they're worth, where we think the red flags might be, where we think that the things are that need to be investigated further could be. And so we work with several new business owners every week, and we work on hundreds of deals a year. So it's a really great position to be in because we get to see so much stuff that's happening. We get to see so many deals. And when somebody comes to us with a certain kind of business, chances are we've already seen it many times before. And so it lets us kind of cut through all of that information very quickly and get down to what needs to be examined in that particular deal.
yeah. Yeah. As you were describing your much longer journey than mine, I've been in this space for about, I think, 5 or 6 years. And initially I was overseeing the transfer of businesses that were sold from the seller to the buyer. And I started just a little bit before the pandemic. And online business quickly changed in terms of the businesses that survived or were even
Oh yeah.
sellable. And so part of the stipulation is that if the business doesn't maintain its performance, I'd have to transfer it back. So yeah, I saw a lot of kind of what you were saying as far as just like all the contingencies for sure. Um, and when you said that a lot of people don't know the mechanisms through which to value their businesses, you think that even being somebody who is a professional at valuing businesses, or do you mean just as the business owner they don't understand that?
Well, let's put it this way. Most business owners don't know how to value their business,
Yeah,
but probably 70% of the SIMs or business profiles we receive here to examine, we understand pretty quickly that the person that put it together doesn't understand how to value them either.
I see.
So what we often see is that people will take a very simplistic approach. They'll look at the P&L and they'll do some add backs and adjustments according to a set of rules that they think is applicable. And then they'll multiply that number, the seller's discretionary earnings quite often, by a certain factor. And they'll say, this is what the business is worth without putting any consideration into the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is important because the balance sheet tells us what kind of operating capital is required. You see, when a buyer is buying a business, they're buying a cash flow. And so the cash flow's value is determined by the riskiness of the cash flow. So small business is risky. We know that businesses sell for relatively low multiplication factors of their cash flow. And so that multiplied number is supposed to give you what's called an enterprise value. And the enterprise value is supposed to be the value of the cash flow, which means if I pay that money, I'm supposed to be able to get that cash flow. But what often we find is that people will then try to add things or they'll remove important components from the business and expect to still be able to sell it for the same price. So, that cash flow, what do you need to make it work? Well, in a lot of businesses, you need machinery and equipment, maybe not in the online space, but for a lot of businesses, there's machinery and equipment or maybe a delivery truck. You need to have some form of operating capital, often in the form of inventory. In some businesses that sell to other businesses, you're going to need operating capital to finance receivables. Part of that may be offset by payables, but there's usually a certain component of the business owner's own cash that is required to sort of grease the wheels of the mechanism of that machine. A net normal position in working capital is what we call that. And so we see it all the time where people will say, my business earns 100 grand a year, so I want to sell it for 300,000 because it's supposed to sell for a 3x multiple, and there's $250,000 worth of inventory. You got to pay me for that too. Well, now what you're asking for is you're asking someone to pay 550,000 for a $100,000 cash flow, and that doesn't make any sense, right? But and you can be as logical as you want sometimes with business sellers, but what's happening within their own minds is some degree of cognitive dissonance because they're trying to contort their thinking into a pretzel to justify in any way they can the highest possible price. Because if you show them that the entire business is only worth 300 grand and it needs to come with whatever normal working capital is required, then what you're doing is you're showing them how if they don't transfer the required working capital to the buyer, that what they're going to get is, the number keeps getting smaller and smaller. And the reality is that most small businesses don't ever sell. Most small businesses close. And that's because most small businesses aren't really worth anything because they have never been developed into something that is truly worthwhile. Um, we use the word business a lot to describe a corporation or an LLC or something like that. I like to take the word business and I like to subdivide it into different categories. So, you know, we often use seller's discretionary earnings to describe the cash flow of a small business. And so a business that has a seller's discretionary earnings that is less than the fair market value of the owner's time working in the business, what that means is that if you had to pay someone to do that owner's work, the business would not be able to afford that. So the business wouldn't exist. It's only open because the business owner is contributing part of their labor for free. And so I call those hobbies. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
not a business, it's a hobby. And then if you've got a business where the SDE is approximately the same amount that a person would earn, as a fair market wage for doing that kind of work, well, now you've got a job, right? Because the person is operating their business, but they're really just being compensated to the same degree that they would working someplace else. It's only when the business has an SDE that's in excess of the fair market value of the owner's labor that you really start to get into a business that both can provide for the salary of its manager owner and give some kind of rate of return for what's been invested to build the business. And then you really get into a true, small business that could have some degree of goodwill. Those jobs and hobbies may also be saleable. I'm not going to say that they're not. It's just that the buyers are going to treat them very differently. If you have a small plumbing outfit with a couple of service vans and you work every day, managing it and turning a wrench sometimes too, and you're basically earning what you would earn as a plumber working for someone else, would somebody want to buy your business? Yeah, probably another plumber that would like to also, have their own little business, but they're not going to look at your business and apply some kind of multiplier thinking that they're buying a business in the way that we invest in, the stock of a company. They're going to look at the value of what they're getting, the trucks, the tools, the equipment, etc. And they're going to basically be saying, like, if I buy this stuff from you, I get this head start in having my own business versus just starting one. Now, that's the way most people would look at that situation. Sometimes people get caught up in a little bit of mania, and they get really excited, and they do deals that they probably shouldn't. That's part of what we do, is we try to calm people down and point some things out to them. We're always looking, for example, at the replacement cost of a business, and what would it realistically cost you if you were going to build this on your own. I know you're chiefly talking about stuff that's in the online space.
Right.
And so what's interesting there is kind of looking at sort of, is there a business that's developed itself some kind of special, really validated demonstration of goodwill? So this could be like an email list with 60,000 names on it, where a certain percentage of those people, when emailed regularly, are making purchases, right? Goodwill is the difference between a business's value, their enterprise value as far as cash flow goes, and the value of tangibles within the business. That's the accounting term. The way that goodwill manifests itself is in things like that email list. Like, it's like, here's the product of our goodwill, the fact that all these people are willing to sign up and be on our list, and they don't unsubscribe every time we send out an email.
Initially, when you were saying, I think that's a very really clarifying way of thinking about this, that the discretionary earnings should be what you can receive if you were to have a job, plus a rate of return that you'd feel good about as an investment for owning the business.
Yeah, well, the seller's discretionary earnings definition is the amount of money available to an owner operator that works full time in the business, one owner operator, and it's a function of EBITDA. So we add back depreciation, amortization, interest, and taxes to get there. But I mean, one of the most common errors that I see in Sims is a business broker will say, "Oh, the husband and wife own the business," and they'll add both of their salaries back, which does not meet the definition.
Right.
Like, what is supposed to happen in that scenario is you're supposed to add then a fair market wage to replace one of the two owners. Sure. And this kind of thing, the first time you see it, you're like, oh, that broker made a mistake. But when you see it once a week, you really start to understand that there's a serious issue of people who get drawn into the industry because they think that there's big commissions to be earned, but who don't necessarily really understand conceptually what they're doing. I remember back in my broker office days when I was acting as a broker earning commissions, I had somebody who came to me, and I did an evaluation on their business. I told them what I thought I could sell it for, and some other broker told them that they could sell it for a much higher price. And so the client went with them. And after a year, they came back to me and they said, I spent a year with them. We got no offers and very few visits of any kind. And he said, I really have to sell now And I said, well, show me what the other guy did, because I honestly hadn't seen it. And the other guy had prepared an evaluation. Basically, it was like kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. And I took a look at it. And what the guy was doing is he was calculating an enterprise value and then adding working capital to it. And I said, his methodology is double counting the working capital. And this is why nobody's coming to see these businesses, because he's systematically overpricing them all. So I mean, that reflects, a lack of understanding the concepts at play, or even more basically, sort of the empathy to look at a deal from the point of view of the other party. One of the challenges that I like, because we work with sellers too, and when we show people what their business is worth, some of them are very disappointed. And so one of the exercises that we will take them through is we'll say, let's look at this deal as though you were buying the business. And let's imagine you're 25 years younger. And let's imagine you have this amount of money, which is approximately what your buyer is going to have. Now, let's look at the price. Let's look at how much you'd have to borrow. Let's look at how much you need to take as a salary. And we'll walk through the deal and show them, yeah, this is what what is affordable. And when I see businesses that are way overpriced, it lets me know that someone just didn't even take the time to look at it from the other party's point of view, which I think is very bizarre, Nick, because business owners spend a lot of time thinking about their customers, right? Like you're thinking about your customer, you're thinking about what your customer wants, what your customer needs.
Right.
Would my customer pay for this other thing? Would they like this other option? Would they like 2-day shipping? Like, I don't know, right? Like, people spend a lot of time thinking about their customer. And then when it comes to selling a business, all of a sudden everyone becomes very self-centered. And they're just thinking about themselves and their millions of dollars and what they're going to spend the money on. But when you decide to sell your business and you go to a business broker, that business broker is like any shopkeeper that has inventory on the shelf. And the inventory is going to be your business. And so that inventory has got to be attractive to the people that come in the front door of the shop looking to buy stuff. And that's the business buyer, right? And so, when you decide to sell your business, you need to think about what the buyer is going to be going through and what their experience is going to be. And at the end of the day, there's got to be meat on the bone for the buyer, or else it doesn't make any sense for the buyer to do a deal.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why I think it was so surprising when you said that a lot of the buyers that you speak with are those who have spent their life savings to buy a business and then reach out and say they regret this decision. I guess when I imagined a lot of buyers.
Those were comments on YouTube of
Okay,
people of people who saw videos saying,
okay.
"Oh, I wish
Not
I had
people who come
seen
to
this,
you.
or
Got
else I wouldn't have done this bad deal." The my hope is that with the content I create, that I help to educate more and more people, so that fewer people do something that doesn't work out for them.
Yep. Yeah. And I think in my mind, there must be a large section of the potential buyer population that they just don't know what they don't know, and they feel just terrified of making the wrong decision. And so they don't make any action, whereas they might have the skills necessary to be successful, or if they knew these things, maybe it's less risky than they think it is, or less difficult. It's tough to know just because they don't know what they don't know. So if you have a buyer coming to you saying, I'm completely new to this, I have, well, I don't know, maybe they would come to you saying, I have this budget, or maybe they'd come to you saying, I have this goal. I want to replace job income. I want to make, I don't know, let's just say I want to make a few $1,000s with this first investment, and to have it be considered a good deal. I don't want to be kicking myself afterwards. What would be the place that you would try to get them to in their mindset, or what would be like the conversations that you would have to I don't know, get them in that place up to speed?
Yeah. So if someone came to me and said, I want your help because I want to buy businesses to replace my income, the very first thing I would respond with is, if you're going to buy a business, you need to know how to run one. Do you know how to run a business? Because buying businesses and owning businesses is something for business people, right? And here's the big difference between buying a small business versus buying stock in Coca-Cola. Like when you buy shares in the big company, the whole leadership apparatus of the company remains. The president, the CEO, and like their plan, all that kind of stuff just stays there. And so you're buying into that and into that leadership. And when you buy a small business, the leadership factor departs. And now you have to step into that role. And I know that there are people who buy businesses and are able to successfully put some kind of manager in place to operate the day to day. But there are certain functions in any small business that will never be delegated. Like I have never heard of somebody buying a small business, putting a manager in place and giving that person full authority over everything, including banking, capital asset decisions, like signing every contract, et cetera, and then just waiting for the end of the year to get a financial statement from their manager. Like that doesn't
Right.
happen. There's a whole slew of top senior decision making functions that never get delegated, especially if you're talking about something where you've put a significant amount of your net worth in, and maybe you've borrowed money and put a personal guarantee on it. Like for most people, these are major investments, and they're going to watch them like a hawk. And so the fact that you're making such a major investment, I would say you need to know how to run the business. And furthermore, to make sure it's a good deal, you should buy a business that makes money that has some kind of problem that you know how to fix. And so for me, if you want to be buying a business, it would be so worth your while to get some degree of experience in being in business. And that doesn't mean necessarily having owned one before, but some kind of management experience, working with other people, or at the very least, some kind of sales experience where you have to go out and make a sale and talk to strangers and think about how you can deliver value to someone, so that you can really think about the workflows, the processes, the customer journeys that people are going to be going through when they're interacting with your business. And I can see the appeal for a lot of people of an online business because they kind of think, oh, I'll be behind my screen the whole time. I'll be doing this from the comfort of my home, and I won't, necessarily have to talk to anybody or something like this. And all the stuff that is a problem for real world brick and mortar businesses generally can also be the same kind of problems that online business owners face. If you're delivering a product, you're going to have logistics issues. You're going to have that, you know, there's going to be all these exceptions to your normal workflow. There's going to be the package that gets lost by the courier. There's going to be the thing that gets stolen on someone's doorstep. There's going to be the person who habitually buys and returns all the time, right? There's going to be all these things that happen, and there's all these exceptions are going to follow to your normal workflow. And guess who has to catch these exceptions? It's going to end up being you. And so when I hear people talking about like buying an online business, and I hear people get excited about it, often what I think people are confused by is they think that online business equals automatic business, or a no work business. Because the clients that I've worked with over the years that have online businesses like e-commerce or even content businesses, where they're generating websites and blogs with content with affiliate links and stuff like that to Amazon, um, they work full time. Like like they work full work weeks to make these businesses function. And then they've got their problems, like those affiliate based businesses. you know Amazon just has to change the rate, and I think they have before at different
Yeah,
times,
they
right?
have.
And then all of a sudden your revenue goes down, and there's nothing really you can do about it. So you've got that customer concentration if all of your revenue is coming from one party in that case. um, so yeah, I mean, I think that people should have some degree of business knowledge and experience before investing in a business. I think that you know I know that there are some very small online businesses out there, and maybe that is a good first step to initiate somebody into this world. um, but yeah, so I don't know, are we getting off track, or did I answer your question?
No, no, that's good. In fact, I wrote down a quote very similar to what you're saying. It was in your book, Buying versus Starting a Small Business. Just you were talking about how business celebrities are really creating this image of just how purely dedication and motivation can help you to succeed, which I would like to believe that myself as well. The quote you said was dedication and motivation and effort are not enough. You also need to be competent and not make mistakes, which I
Yeah.
think is a pretty daunting thought. One question that immediately rises is, how do I know when I'm ready? Like somebody who is a business professional, it's being a business professional is different from owning a business, but you still have some transferable experience. But it's hard to know again what you don't know until you're actually in it. So like that's one question: is how do how do I know if I'm competent enough for to even be involved in this game of acquiring an online business? Um, and then, of course, what are those mistakes? You mentioned that there are a lot of dumb mistakes, uh, some of which sounded like they were uh, in businesses that were not online businesses. Some of those examples. So I'm curious to
Mhm.
hear. So first of all, the skills. When does somebody know that they're ready? And then second is, um, let's see, it was Oh, does your opinion differ for online businesses compared to some of the more traditional brick and mortar businesses that you originally mentioned in your books?
So I'd like to tackle that one first, and then we'll get
Okay,
into the when
sure.
do you know you're ready. So probably in the late '90s, I was, really seeing this difference between real life businesses, brick and mortar businesses, and online businesses. And it was just because the internet was so new, and the types of businesses that were appearing were kind of new-ish kind of businesses.
Sure.
Um, but after a while, I realized they weren't. Like, the e-commerce business that puts stuff up, puts a Shopify page up, and then they're selling stuff and shipping it out. What that is just a mail order catalog business, like we saw in 1990, that you would get a catalog in the mail and you would call a toll free number and give them your
Sure.
credit card and they would mail you
Right.
stuff, right? It's the same business. It just looks different because they've got rid of the catalog and they have a website instead. And then what's happened also is that these real life brick and mortar businesses are migrating so much of their activity into the internet. So in my own business, when I started doing this consulting work, I still had paper files. On every new customer that came in, I would have a file folder with their name on it, and I would have documents in the file folder, and I would be referring to these things while I was working on my computer, just like back in 1990 when I was like working on an essay and I had all my paper notes, and I don't anymore. Everything that I touch now is in the cloud. It's all in Google Drives, and I've got an online CRM, and I have a team of people now, and none of us live in the same city. And so we're all working virtually. Um, so I've kind of like taken my brick and mortar real life business and kind of moved it into this kind of mid ground space where all my marketing and advertising is on the internet. Part of the products and things that I sell are online, like my books that I sell are online, my courses that I sell are online. We sell all of our consulting online, but I've never heard of a consulting business being called an online business. But we do it all online, right? And so there's this kind of like uh, grayness that's appearing where, you know, the brake shop where you take your car is definitely always going to have a strong foothold in the real world because you got to take your car there and the people there have to do the work and they have to touch your car, right? But everything else is kind of like migrating in this space. And if you have a real world brick and mortar business and you do not have some kind of online presence or a strategy or take advantage of, social media for marketing, then you're really going to fall behind really quickly. So, so I see the line is blurred. Who is who? What was your first question? Is like, how do you know when you're ready?
Hmm.
I think you know when you're ready when you start to think of yourself as a business person. So I have run into many people over the course of my career, for example, who will say, "I really want to be in business. I just can't think of a good idea." And then, you know, in my own lived experience, the problem is constant distraction from a never ending series of ideas, of concepts, of iterations that I see all around me for what would make a good business. And when I talk with other business people who've been in business or who really aspire to be in business, they also suffer from that mindset where it's so much opportunity all over the place in every little way. They're always thinking about all these different ideas, concepts, iterations, et cetera, that they could do. The problem is focusing on ones that are going to be
Yeah.
worthwhile and exploitable and likely to succeed. So, how do you get from the person who just can't seem to think of anything to migrate yourself over to the person who sees opportunity in business everywhere. And I honestly think it's, what are your interests? Like, I love to read business biographies. I love to see business news. I want to know what's going on in the world. I love to talk with business people. I've got a bunch of different groups of friends that I meet with from time to time over for different reasons. We'll meet for beers, we'll meet for at someone's house for a party or a backyard fire or whatever. It always ends up being business conversations because we're all into business, we're interested in business, and we're business people. When you self-identify as a business person and you are driven by this thirst for knowledge and greater understanding and wanting to learn, and you just live and breathe the stuff, then I think you need to, test your skills. And this is why I think something like sales is such a great baby step into the world of business. Because if you're going to do a sales job, you have full accountability and responsibility for what you're doing with your time and what comes out of your mouth and what you're doing as far as effort. And the value you're able to deliver and the way you're able to organize yourself and how you can execute on that is going to be easily measured with the number of dollars you bring into the organization in some way. And you're going to have to face all of your fears with respect to calling people on the phone, talking to strangers, etc., making presentations, all that kind of thing. And so I've always encouraged people who say, I don't know if I'm ready to be in business. I say, go work in sales. And if you're afraid of that, volunteer for some kind of fundraising or something. Go help the local animal shelter raise money by asking people for donations. Like, there's a series of barriers there between you and the state you wish to achieve. And you just have to work through those barriers and turn yourself into the person that you aspire to be. I always ask people, like, where did the idea of buying a business come from? Is it something that has always been within you? When you were a kid, did you play store with your friends? Like, did you pretend to have a little shop? Like, did you pretend to be in business when you were a kid? Or have you just, basically grown up, go to school, went to university, etc., always kind of like on this career path, and then one day you saw an Instagram ad that said, "Oh, baby boomers are retiring. Are you going to get a part of this great wealth transfer?" And then you got excited about it, right? So who planted the seed in your mind? Is this actually something that is internally motivated, or do you feel that you need to do it because somehow you're going to miss out if you don't? You know, I really think that people's self-image has to be in alignment with what they're doing in order to avoid bad things like self-sabotage and self-doubt and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I think someone's ready to buy a business when they have become a business person. Yeah.
Yeah. And this kind of, I know we've been painting kind of a like darker picture of online business, but clearly you're in the space because this is what you're promoting, and you want to help people to see the lighter side of that. One of the concepts from your book, Smarter Than a Startup, well, I guess the premise of it is being an investor versus, well, I guess being an investor versus an entrepreneur, or like another approach to entrepreneurship that isn't from just purely building from scratch. Is that kind of similar to what you're describing right now, which is like innately you have this desire to build something, and yet you think buying or acquiring is a better pathway than building?
I don't think so, because I've seen people jump onto one side and then the other of that fence. If you think entrepreneurs are business starters and investors are business buyers, I've met so many people over my career who've started a business, and then after going through all of the work and effort and anxiety and stress of starting that business, and then they succeed and have money, the next business they get into, they want to buy because they want to avoid all that stuff. But then I've also seen people who've done several acquisitions and then see a great opportunity and they don't see how they can do the opportunity through an acquisition. So they start something, right? And so I've seen people go back and forth on both sides. The in Smarter Than a Startup, what what I was trying to address is that some people have an idea for a business and then they go all in on trying to create this idea. And what I was trying to get across is that you can look for an existing business that already has cash flow and revenue and sales and profits, that can become the platform for you to get into the new idea you have and greatly reduce the risk. Like big companies like General Mills, for example, I mean, they come out with new products all the time. They are investing in iterative startups within the platform of their big multinational conglomerate food company, and most of those new products that they come up with fail, right? And then they just keep the winners. But so are they really risking much if they know that they're still going to be profitable and delivering a dividend for shareholder because of all the great products they have in their line that have always been successful? Well, they reduce the risk of these new innovations by enveloping it in the continuously profitable cash flow of their existing business.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to show people that they could do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very cool. I didn't, I mean, it was kind of a thought, but it was never truly articulated in the way that you did. So that kind of, it was just very exciting what that kind of possibility entailed.
Oh,
Cool.
thanks.
Out of curiosity, since you have been doing this for as long as you have, has your mindset changed at all related to the content that you've put out, related to the businesses that you've personally gotten into, just knowing how your philosophy exists as it is today? Is there anything you would have done differently?
It's a great question. No one's asked me that before. I think that when I first the nature of whom I'm meeting has changed, and so I don't think I would do anything differently in the beginning. But the things I talk about has had to change because of who I'm meeting. So, for example, when I first started out online, I was making a YouTube video every week. Each one of the videos answered a specific question. And so the people I was meeting were people who had already decided that they were trying to buy a business and they were typing questions into platforms like Google. And my videos would come up sometimes as the answer to the question. And so I would meet these people who were like on their way to buy a business. They were self-motivated. They already knew this is what they wanted to do, etc. Today, because of this conversation around the silver tsunami, I'm meeting all kinds of people who are being drawn into this through the gravity of the content, I guess. And
Can
they're
you elaborate on the silver tsunami?
Well, just the silver tsunami is just a descriptor to describe the fact that the baby boom generation
Yeah.
is retiring and a lot of their businesses are up for sale. So it's that term has been used before.
Yeah.
So now I'm meeting people who've never in their life ever considered getting into business at all, but they somehow feel that they need to get on this bandwagon because they're going to miss out on a big opportunity to somehow buy this really profitable business from a baby boomer at a super cheap price, and they're foolish for not taking advantage of that. And I hear some crazy stuff online, like people will say the baby boom generation is retiring and there's not enough buyers for their businesses. But I can tell you that when I was doing business brokerage back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, for every good business I listed for sale, I was getting at least 10 or 15 inquiries in the first week. There have always been enough buyers for good businesses. There are not enough buyers for all the crappy businesses and marginal businesses and ones that don't make any money, right?
Yeah.
But those are just going to close, and they always have. Like Biz Buy Sell puts out a report, and on their platform, they're saying 80% of the stuff that gets listed never gets sold, right?
Wow.
And it's just in alignment with what I've seen as far as the sort of ratio of good businesses to not. Not to say that someone who built a business that pays themselves 100 grand a year and they've run that business for 40 years, they did well. They provided for themselves. They did great. Does it make sense for someone else to come and buy that business? Well, it depends a lot on the price and the terms and the conditions. And there's a lot of businesses that probably could be sold. And the problem is they never get exposed to the market in the correct way. So the owner either doesn't understand what it's worth and they overprice it, or they don't meet the right intermediary who can help them, and they end up with an unsellable listing. And then, once someone's expectation gets out of whack, it I think that people have to go through a mourning process. I'll give you an example. Someone's got a $300,000 business, but they're told they can sell it for 600 grand or $1 million. And it is pretty common for us to see sims come in here where the asking price is double what it should be. And so then you have this seller now who believes, because they don't know how to value business, but they believe their business is worth 600 grand or $1 million. Then someone makes them a reasonable offer at 300,000 and they think it's a low ball, right? And then you sit down and you show them that it's a reasonable offer, and they think that you're trying to, defraud them, lie to them, trick them. And a year goes by and they get three more $300,000 offers. And then eventually they begin to think, hey, maybe my business really is only worth 300 grand. But now they need to mourn the loss of the differential, because in their mind, they thought it was worth 600 grand. Now they have to go through that a mourning process, which can take months or a year to mourn the loss of this money, which never existed. It was just in their mind. And what ends up happening over the course of this time, Nick, is that they're getting older, they're getting less enthusiastic, they're putting less effort into the business, they're not returning calls at 7 p.m., they're not on top of all the maintenance in the shop, et cetera, et cetera. Their attitude starts to decline because they're not as interested in working as hard in the business, and the sales start to go down, the profits start to go down, the performance starts to go down, now the value starts to go down. And they end up chasing this downward spiral, and they never get the opportunity to exit because they never got the right help in the first place.
Yeah. I can sense this is really just the tip of the iceberg, as far as a lot of sellers might be listening to this thinking, well, all right, what do I need to do then right now? Buyers listening to this, how do I avoid some of those mistakes? Where can people learn more about you, potentially work with you, or just get on the right path, whether they're a seller or a buyer?
Sure. If you're interested in learning more and getting into more of my content, just type David Barnett Small Business into YouTube or any podcast platform and you'll find me right away. And davidcbarnett.com is my blog site where all the new stuff gets posted, and you can find out, all about the books, the courses, etc. And we have a new thing where if you join my email list, you get 7 free gifts over the course of the first few weeks, including a couple of my books as PDFs. So it's really worthwhile if you want to get more into this space and really learn, all about buying, selling, financing, and managing these small businesses.
That's awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. I know we're right at the hour, so I want to be respectful of your time, but this was an awesome conversation. I'm going to sign up for that myself. I bought one of the books, so I suggest you all sign up as well, as one of those books is free. And I can say that they are definitely helpful. So yeah, thank you again. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.